In South Boston, there were projects where the poor were assigned government-built and maintained units and buildings. The residents were mostly Irish, separated into projects that were deeply divided yet, at their core, similar. These projects were filled with petty crime and hopelessness, the residents yearning for advancement but denied because, trapped in their rundown projects, they had no way to overcome the limitations of their socioeconomic position. The American dream was not a reality for these South Boston residents, who lived in poverty and squalor and channeled their own class tensions and racial struggles into violence against blacks, resulting in the Boston bus riots. In the South Boston projects, race took on a new meaning. Beyond skin color, race extended to class. Within the projects, residents were mostly separated by race, mainly blacks from whites and the Irish Southie residents from other whites. In Southie, the term nigger carried a different connotation. Beyond referring to someone of African descent, it was used to describe anyone of a lower class. Because Southie residents created a new race system based on class, people of different projects began to be characterized by where they lived and their socioeconomic status. The residents of City Point, closest to the water, were working class and looked down at all the other Southie residents, calling them white niggers. They dressed in clean, neat clothes, while the D Street residents, considered the poorest of the projects, looked hopeless, dirty, and poor. However, despite differences, the Southie residents all had a Southie look that identified them from other groups. Kids tattooed themselves with the green Southie dot, signifying acceptance within the neighborhood, but painting a target on the bearer's back outside Southie. Because of their Irish heritage, Southie residents were discriminated against the moment they stepped out of their own projects, even by residents in other projects due to class lines. White Southie residents looked down on residents in black projects. Columbia Point, referred to derisively as Niggerville, was widely believed to be a place where all these blacks lived with no teeth, bottles of booze in paper bags, and guns and knives. However, had the Southie residents looked around themselves, they would have seen that their own neighborhood was much the same: crime, alcoholism, and poverty rampant. South Boston residents lived in squalor within their projects, turning to lives of crime. In most projects, the homes were rough ramshackle brick buildings in disrepair, crammed close together. The residents highest on the hierarchy were working class, while many others were unemployed or engaged in illegal activity to support themselves. In order to be accepted into the neighborhood, kids had to prove their toughness through fighting. Drug deals took place on open streets and alcoholism was rampant. People in Southie, however, felt that their projects were paradise. Feeling a strong sense of community, Southie residents found happiness within their projects by forming strong bonds with each other. To them, their rundown neighborhoods were Eden. Placing themselves above blacks, Southie residents sought joy in community instead of squalor and crime. They denied their own lifestyle, calling it niggerish, and refusing to see that that same word applied to their own lives of poverty, reliance, and petty crime. When integration took hold, residents had to come to terms with the fact that they and the blacks that they had looked down upon were more similar than they had wanted to believe. Just as poor, just as marginalized, and just as bullied by the upper-class white authority, both groups are being discriminated against. Southie residents, however, wanted to cling to racial superiority and had so lashed out against the idea of becoming equal to blacks in name, even though in all other aspects they already were. When forced to integrate their schools, Southie residents channeled their own class frustrations into animosity against blacks. The judge who ordered school integration was a wealthy suburban white who accused Southie residents of being racist while refusing to integrate his own suburban school systems. This stark class divide only added fuel to the fire. Residents banded together in their neighborhoods to fight off blacks being bussed in and also the police. They carried signs protesting integration as well as the authority forcing them to do so. Groups of angry Southie residents threw rocks and shouted racial slurs, forcing Massachusetts State Police, SWAT teams, and the Tactical Police Force to come in and crush the resistance. The police came in on horseback, motorcycles, and cruisers, beating protesters, including children, who were on the scene. Fights broke out in the mobs and also within the schools. The bloody, hate-fueled aftermath of school integration in Boston asks us to question what could have been done to make the process more effective. Maybe if the schools of wealthy whites had also been integrated, the Southie residents would not feel so separated from and bullied by the upper class. Or perhaps if the poor quality of life in projects was improved, then the crime that perpetuated violent tendencies could be eradicated and class disparity eased. The violent reaction to integration was not racial, but a matter of Southie residents channeling class frustration into a racial debate. They were afraid of being pushed even farther down the class ladder, as they had always tenuously held themselves above blacks. So desperate to cling to their idea of paradise and so furious when their idealistic image of their own lives was shattered. Southie residents lashed out against the upper-class whites that oppressed them and the blacks they feared becoming.